The hall was buzzing with excitement as people found their seats. Everyone seemed eager to see the next performer, whispering and laughing among themselves, the energy almost tangible. At the back, a small group was joking about how the next act might be entertaining simply because it was different. Some people rolled their eyes, expecting nothing serious. They had seen many performers over the years, and the atmosphere was one of casual amusement rather than genuine anticipation. On stage, the lights glowed softly, casting a warm, golden hue over the empty platform. It was a large hall, and the echoes of the chatter bounced off the walls, making the room feel alive. The organizers checked the microphones, moved chairs slightly, and whispered instructions to each other. The audience was oblivious to the quiet preparation behind the scenes. They only saw what would come next, and their minds were full of assumptions. Backstage, a young woman sat on a small chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her heart raced, and her stomach felt like it was full of butterflies. She glanced at the audience through a small gap in the curtain and immediately felt the weight of their eyes, though they did not yet know she existed. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, and looked down at her instrument resting against her leg. It had been her companion for years, a silent friend that never judged her and always made her feel at home. Today, she needed it more than ever. Her life had been far from easy. Growing up, she had always been quiet, often overshadowed by louder voices around her. She had learned to observe more than to speak, to listen more than to shout. People often underestimated her, assuming that her silence meant weakness or lack of talent. But that silence was where she learned, where she practiced, where she poured her thoughts into the music she played when no one was around. That music had kept her sane through difficult times and had become a language she could speak fluently without words. She remembered the many nights she had stayed up alone, practicing notes until her fingers ached, tuning her instrument until it sang perfectly, learning to express feelings she could never say aloud. Every mistake she had made had taught her something. Every small triumph had encouraged her to keep going. She was ready, though she doubted it would matter to anyone else. After all, the audience outside the curtain had already formed an opinion without seeing her, a common mistake people made far too often. The host's voice came through the microphone, announcing her name, though she almost did not hear it over the pounding of her heart. She stood slowly, clutching her instrument, and stepped toward the stage. The audience, seeing her timid frame and hesitant steps, let out a few snickers. Some whispered to their neighbors, pointing at her unusual appearance and quiet demeanor. Their laughter was light but unmistakable. It could have crushed someone with less determination, but she forced herself to breathe, reminding herself why she was there. Every step she took felt heavier than the last, as though the floor itself resisted her movement. She reached the center of the stage and paused for a moment, looking out at the crowd. The laughter seemed louder now, echoing in her ears. A small part of her wanted to turn and run back behind the curtain, to disappear and escape the judgment. But she steadied herself, placing the instrument carefully in position, hands trembling slightly as she adjusted it. She closed her eyes for a brief second and drew in a deep, steadying breath, recalling the many times she had overcome fear in the privacy of her room. She reminded herself that she did not need their approval. She only needed to be true to her art. As the first notes escaped from her instrument, the audience still chuckled quietly, some shaking their heads, expecting a simple, funny performance. But the notes were precise and intentional, carefully crafted through hours of practice. Even in the first few moments, there was a depth that went unnoticed by most. The young woman focused intently, losing herself in the music, and a quiet transformation began to take place. The laughter began to fade, replaced by subtle looks of curiosity. People began to straighten in their seats, tilting their heads as if trying to understand the unexpected beauty in what they were hearing. Behind her, the stage crew watched silently. They had seen countless performers, but even they could feel the subtle shift in energy. The hall, once filled with chatter and snickers, started to quiet down. A few audience members unconsciously leaned forward, caught by the sincerity and emotion that poured from the instrument. It was delicate yet strong, simple yet profound, and it carried the essence of the performer's life within it. The music told a story that words could never convey, one of struggle, resilience, and quiet strength. She played with every ounce of herself, each note carefully chosen, not for applause, but for truth. Her eyes remained closed most of the time, allowing her to feel each vibration and hear every resonance as it filled the hall. She did not see the faces anymore. She only felt the connection to the music, to the world she had built through countless hours of solitude and practice. The hall became a bridge between her inner world and the outer reality, a space where the laughter outside could no longer touch her. Slowly, the first few notes of her performance started to reach the audience in a new way. A hush fell over some of the people who had laughed initially. Their smiles faded, replaced by attentive eyes and slightly open mouths. They did not understand how the shy, quiet girl on stage could produce something so moving, something that reached deep into their hearts without a single word being spoken. They felt something shift, an unexpected emotion they had not anticipated. It was rare for a performance to catch them off guard, and now they were caught entirely. She noticed the subtle changes, though she did not allow herself to pause or think about them. Instead, she played harder, with more confidence, allowing the music to flow naturally, carrying the emotions she had stored for so long. Memories of difficult days, moments of self-doubt, and tiny victories all mingled into her performance. Every note had meaning. Every melody was a piece of her story. The audience, slowly and unconsciously, began to connect with that story. Their initial laughter became a distant memory, replaced by a profound stillness that wrapped around the room like a soft blanket. In the front row, a few people had tears in their eyes. They did not know why at first. They only knew that the music touched something inside them they could not articulate. Some looked at each other, silently sharing the unexpected moment of emotional connection. The young woman, still focused entirely on her music, sensed the shift even without seeing it directly. Her heart lifted slightly, not because of recognition or praise, but because she knew she was reaching people in the way she had always hoped. This was the power she had been chasing, the one she had only dreamed of in quiet moments. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours to her. She remained absorbed, neither rushing nor hesitating, allowing the story to unfold naturally. The audience, once so ready to laugh, was now completely immersed. They could feel the weight of her journey, the struggles she had faced alone, and the quiet strength that had carried her this far. It was a moment of revelation for everyone in the hall, a realization that appearances could be deceiving and that true talent often hid behind modesty. By the time the last notes floated into the air, a profound silence had settled. No one moved immediately. They sat in awe, absorbing the impact of what they had just witnessed. Even those who had laughed at the beginning could not deny the raw emotion that had touched them. The young woman opened her eyes slowly, seeing a few faces glisten with tears, some hands clenched in quiet admiration. A deep sense of relief washed over her as she finally felt a connection that she had longed for but never expected to find in such a public setting. She allowed herself a small, quiet smile, acknowledging the moment without letting herself be distracted. She had done it. She had faced her fears, walked onto a stage that had laughed at her, and transformed their amusement into awe. It was a triumph not measured in applause or accolades, but in the unseen emotional bridge she had built between herself and every person in that hall. It was her victory, and it was hers alone. The audience began to clap softly at first, then louder, some rising to their feet, their expressions filled with newfound respect. The laughter that had greeted her entry was completely gone, replaced by something deeper and more meaningful. It was not just approval. It was recognition of her courage, her dedication, and the authenticity of her performance. It was a reminder that the world often underestimates those who appear quiet or unassuming, and that brilliance can emerge from the most unexpected places. Backstage, she took a moment to breathe and collect herself. Her heart was still racing, but it was a different kind of racing now, one of accomplishment and quiet pride. She knew that this was only the beginning of her journey, and that there would be many more performances to come, but the impact of this moment would stay with her forever. She had learned something invaluable, that courage, sincerity, and passion could speak louder than laughter, and that the true measure of a performer was not how they were received at first, but the depth of connection they created with their audience. And as she stepped back, allowing the next act to take the stage, she carried with her the knowledge that she had faced a moment of doubt, transformed it with talent and heart, and left an indelible mark on every soul present. The story of a shy, quiet girl who walked onto a stage to laughter and created tears of admiration had only just begun. The young woman returned to her small dressing room, still feeling the rush of adrenaline from the performance. Her hands shook slightly as she set her instrument down, but her heart was lighter than it had been in years. The laughter that had greeted her entry now seemed like a distant memory. She sank onto the chair, letting her mind wander back to the moments that had brought her to this stage. She had not always imagined herself performing in front of a crowd. For most of her life, she had been content to keep her music private, a secret language she shared only with herself. She remembered her earliest days, sitting alone in her bedroom, fingers tracing the strings of her instrument, finding solace in the notes that spoke when no one else seemed to understand. Music had been her escape from the world's expectations, a place where mistakes did not carry shame, and where every sound she made was a piece of her own story. Her journey had been far from easy. Growing up, her home had been filled with constant movement and noise, people speaking over one another, leaving little space for her quiet presence. She had been shy, retreating into herself, finding strength in observing others rather than speaking. Often, she felt invisible, like a small shadow in a room full of light. Her talent went unnoticed for years, hidden under layers of uncertainty and fear. But she never stopped practicing. Every night, she poured herself into the music, discovering her own voice one note at a time. There had been many moments when she had doubted herself, times when she considered giving up, thinking that the world would never recognize her worth. She remembered the nights when she had practiced until her fingers ached, tears streaming down her face, as she tried to perfect a piece she could barely play. But each time, she found a spark within her, a quiet determination that kept her going. It was that same determination that had brought her to the stage, that allowed her to face an audience ready to laugh and transform their expectations. She thought about her mentor, the one person who had recognized her potential when no one else had. They had encouraged her to share her music, to trust that it could touch others, even if the world seemed indifferent. Their words echoed in her mind now. Talent is not enough. Courage is what makes it shine. She realized that courage had been her companion as much as her music had, a quiet force that pushed her forward even when the path seemed impossible. The memories of her preparation for this performance came flooding back. She had spent weeks practicing, not just the notes, but the emotions behind them. She had learned to convey feelings through her music, to make each melody a story that listeners could feel. She had imagined the audience's reactions, the way they might underestimate her at first, and then the moment when they would realize the depth of what she could offer. Every rehearsal had been a step toward this moment, and now it had come to life in a way she could not have fully anticipated. She thought about the small sacrifices she had made along the way. Friends had invited her to gatherings she had declined. Nights out had been replaced with long hours of practice. She had learned to say no to distractions, to focus on the path she had chosen, even when it was lonely. There had been times when she wondered if it was worth it, when the world seemed indifferent to her talent. But in the quiet moments after her performance, she knew that it had been worth every struggle, every lonely night, every doubt she had overcome. Her mind drifted to the people who had doubted her. She had faced skepticism from family, friends, and strangers alike. They had assumed that her quiet nature meant weakness, that her small frame could not carry the weight of talent and expression. But she had learned to listen to her own voice, to trust the music she had nurtured in private. Today had been a small victory over all those doubts, a moment where her talent and courage spoke louder than any words or assumptions. As she sat there, she reflected on the audience's reaction. The laughter had been sharp, almost cutting, but it had not broken her. Instead, it had given her an opportunity to prove something not just to them but to herself. She had faced the judgment, allowed herself to feel the fear, and then turned it into a performance that transcended the initial ridicule. That transformation, she realized, was more powerful than applause. It was the moment when she had owned her space, when she had allowed her true self to shine without compromise. The dressing room was quiet, and she allowed herself a small smile. She knew this was only one performance in a long journey. There would be more audiences, more challenges, and more moments of doubt. But she felt stronger now, more certain of her ability to face whatever came next. She had learned that talent was important, but resilience, courage, and authenticity were what truly made a performer unforgettable. She recalled the faces in the audience as she played, the subtle changes in expression as the music unfolded, the curiosity that replaced laughter, the growing admiration, and the moments of quiet reflection that hinted at tears. Each reaction had been a reminder of the power of honesty in art, the way that genuine emotion could reach across the space between performer and listener. She realized that this connection, fragile and invisible, was the essence of what she sought as a musician. The applause was secondary. The impact on the hearts of others was what mattered most. The young woman thought about the future, imagining herself in other halls, other stages, facing new audiences with the same mixture of fear and hope. She knew that each performance would be a new challenge, a new opportunity to grow, and to share the music that lived inside her. She had discovered a strength she did not fully realize before, a quiet confidence that came not from validation, but from the knowledge that she had confronted her fears and stayed true to her art. She remembered her first music teacher, who had noticed her talent when she was just a child. They had encouraged her to explore the depths of her abilities, to listen to the music within herself, and to trust that it could resonate with others. Those lessons, small and seemingly ordinary at the time, had shaped the foundation of her journey. They had taught her that the most important audience was not the one in front of her, but the one inside her own heart, the voice that encouraged her to keep going even when the world seemed indifferent. The room grew darker as the evening went on, but she hardly noticed. She was lost in reflection, replaying the performance in her mind, feeling each note again as if it were happening for the first time. The fear, the doubt, the courage, and the connection all mingled into a rich tapestry of emotion that made her feel alive in a way she had never experienced before. She realized that this was not just a performance. It was a revelation, a moment of self-discovery that would shape the rest of her life. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, letting herself feel gratitude for the journey that had led her here. The struggles, the quiet nights of practice, the moments of loneliness and doubt, all of it had been necessary to reach this point. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had faced a challenge that had once seemed insurmountable and had emerged stronger on the other side. It was a feeling that words could not capture, a quiet triumph that belonged entirely to her. As she prepared to leave the dressing room, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The performance had been more than just an opportunity to show her talent. It had been a lesson in resilience, courage, and authenticity. She had learned that the world's laughter could be transformed into understanding, that doubt could become strength, and that the quiet voice inside her could speak louder than any external judgment. She walked out with her head held high, ready to face whatever came next, carrying the lessons of this night with her into every future challenge. She paused for a moment in the hallway, listening to the echoes of the audience's applause from the stage. It was not the sound that mattered most, but the knowledge that she had made a difference, however small, in the hearts of those who had listened. She knew that she would continue to grow, to face new fears, and to share her music with the world. But the memory of this night, the first time she had turned laughter into admiration, would stay with her forever, a reminder of the power of courage, dedication, and authenticity in a world that often underestimated quiet strength. The next day, she woke up early, the sunlight spilling softly through the small window of her room. Her mind was still full of the memories from the night before, the applause, the faces in the audience, the feeling of music flowing through her. She sat quietly for a few minutes, letting the warmth of the morning sink into her bones, and thought about what it meant to step onto a stage and give everything she had. The day began slowly, with familiar routines that grounded her. She prepared her instrument, tuning it carefully, running her fingers lightly over its surface as if greeting an old friend. Each string responded to her touch, familiar yet full of potential, waiting for her hands to bring life to it once again. She knew she had to practice more, to refine what she had shared, and to explore the emotions that had stirred her audience. The quiet room, her small sanctuary, allowed her to think, to remember, and to dream. She reflected on the audience's reaction, still astonished at the shift she had witnessed. The laughter had transformed into something else entirely. Respect, attention, and even tears. It was more than recognition. It was a bridge between her private world and the lives of others. That realization filled her with a mixture of humility and excitement. She understood that every performance carried the power to touch people in ways that words often could not. It was a responsibility she took seriously, one that demanded honesty and courage. She decided to revisit some of the pieces she had played the night before. Each note held meaning, but she wanted to explore them deeper, to uncover layers of emotion she might have missed. She played slowly at first, listening intently to every sound, feeling the vibrations as they traveled from her fingers to the instrument. Her mind drifted back to the countless hours she had spent alone, perfecting each melody, learning to communicate through music when words felt insufficient. Every practice session, every minor failure, had led her to this moment, and she felt gratitude for every struggle that had brought her here. Her thoughts turned to the people who had doubted her, who had laughed when she walked on stage. She did not dwell on their negativity. Instead, she allowed herself to understand it. They had not seen her dedication, the countless nights spent in quiet preparation, the sacrifices she had made to nurture her talent. She realized that their laughter was not an obstacle, but an opportunity to show her true strength. It was a reminder that the world often judged too quickly, and that the most profound moments were born from patience, courage, and persistence. As she practiced, she noticed subtle improvements in her playing. The notes felt more precise, the emotion more palpable. She experimented with small changes, variations that allowed her personality to shine through even more clearly. The music was no longer just a sequence of notes. It was a conversation between her and the instrument, a dialogue that allowed her to express feelings too complex for words alone. She felt alive in a way she had not before, as if each sound connected her to something larger than herself, something both personal and universal. The afternoon passed quietly, filled with music and reflection. She stepped outside briefly to feel the fresh air, carrying her instrument with her. The sun warmed her face as she walked slowly through the empty streets, listening to the distant sounds of life around her. It was a simple, ordinary world, yet she felt that her music could touch even these everyday moments. She imagined playing in different places, sharing her gift with people she might never meet, and realized that her journey was just beginning. The stage was not the only space where her talent could make an impact. Every interaction, every note played, had the potential to connect hearts. Returning indoors, she continued to explore new ideas for her performances. She thought about the pieces that had moved her audience, and how she could convey even more depth in the future. She experimented with pacing, with emphasis, with the way her fingers moved across the strings. Each experiment was a discovery, a new way to communicate the emotions that lived within her. She realized that performance was not just about showing skill. It was about honesty, about revealing something true and raw that could touch others in unexpected ways. Her mind wandered to the people she hoped to reach with her music. She thought of those who, like her, had felt invisible or overlooked, those who carried quiet struggles that no one acknowledged. She imagined her melodies providing comfort, hope, or inspiration, offering a sense of connection in a world that often felt distant. The thought filled her with purpose, a sense of mission that went beyond personal achievement. Music was more than a skill. It was a language that could bridge gaps and create understanding where words failed. As evening approached, she prepared for another small gathering where she would play. This was not a stage with hundreds of spectators, but a modest room with a handful of listeners. Still, she approached it with the same seriousness, understanding that every opportunity to perform was a chance to grow and to connect. She set up her instrument, checked the strings, and took a moment to breathe, centering herself for what was to come. Each performance, she knew, was a lesson, a step toward becoming the artist she aspired to be. The gathering began, and as she played, she noticed familiar reactions. At first, some smiles, a few quiet whispers, but then attentiveness, the soft widening of eyes, the small signs of emotional engagement. She played with intentionality, letting the melodies carry the story she wanted to tell. It was not about impressing anyone. It was about truth, about allowing her emotions and experiences to be shared through sound. The connection she felt with the listeners was immediate and profound, reinforcing the lessons she had learned about courage, persistence, and authenticity. After the performance, people approached her quietly, offering words of admiration and thanks. Some spoke of how the music had moved them, how it had reminded them of forgotten emotions or given them comfort. She listened, grateful but humble, knowing that the impact was not about recognition, but about connection. She realized that her role was not just to perform, but to communicate, to share a part of herself in a way that could touch the lives of others. It was a responsibility she accepted with humility and dedication. Later that night, she reflected on the day's experiences. The quiet moments of practice, the interactions with the small audience, and the memories of the previous performance all merged into a deeper understanding of her path. She recognized the importance of persistence, the value of facing fear, and the power of honest expression. Every step she took, no matter how small, contributed to the development of her voice, her confidence, and her ability to reach others through music. She considered the future, imagining stages both large and small, audiences both skeptical and attentive. She knew there would be challenges, moments of doubt, and opportunities for growth. Yet she felt equipped to face them, strengthened by the experiences that had brought her to this point. She had learned to embrace uncertainty, to trust her instincts, and to rely on the quiet determination that had carried her this far. Her journey was not just about skill or recognition. It was about truth, courage, and connection. In the stillness of her room, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about the laughter that had greeted her, the transformation that had followed, and the emotions she had witnessed in the audience. She understood now that performance was not about meeting expectations, but about transcending them. It was about authenticity, vulnerability, and the willingness to share one's true self. That understanding gave her a sense of purpose, a clarity that would guide her in every future endeavor. As she lay down to rest, her mind replayed the melodies, the faces, the small moments of connection that had defined her day. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had embraced her fears and transformed them into something meaningful. The journey ahead was still long, but she was no longer afraid of what it might hold. She had discovered the power of courage, the strength of perseverance, and the impact of honest expression. And with those discoveries, she felt ready to continue, to explore, and to share her music with the world in ways she had only begun to imagine. The night of the next big performance arrived, and the young woman felt a mixture of nerves and anticipation. The hall was larger this time, filled with more people, and the air was thick with expectation. She had learned from her previous experiences that the audience's first impression often carried weight, but it was not permanent. She carried the knowledge that her preparation, her dedication, and her honesty could transform skepticism into appreciation. Backstage, she held her instrument close, feeling its familiar weight and texture. She breathed deeply, centering herself, remembering the countless hours of practice and the moments of struggle that had brought her here. She allowed herself a brief glance through the curtain, seeing the crowd waiting. Some faces were curious, some skeptical, and a few seemed indifferent. She did not allow herself to be distracted. Her focus was on the music, on the story she wanted to tell, and on the emotions she wished to share. As she stepped onto the stage, she could hear a few chuckles and whispers. Her entrance was met with light laughter, some people nudging their neighbors, thinking the performance might be amusing in a simple way. She paused for a moment, letting her presence settle, and then began to play. The first few notes were tentative, cautious, as if testing the waters. The laughter persisted for a few seconds, But she did not waver. She focused on the music, letting her fingers find the melody that had lived in her heart for so long. Slowly, the music began to change the atmosphere. The tentative notes grew stronger, more confident, filled with emotion. She felt herself becoming one with the instrument, the music flowing naturally, carrying her story to the audience. The laughter began to fade, replaced by subtle looks of curiosity and attention. Eyes widened slightly, people leaned forward, and the quiet began to take over the space once filled with amusement. The hall seemed to hold its breath, caught in the unexpected beauty of what they were hearing. She played with every ounce of herself, each note carefully placed, each pause intentional. The music told a story of struggle, hope, and resilience, the silent experiences of a life lived quietly but intensely. She had learned to convey emotion through every movement, to let the instrument speak for her in ways words never could. The audience, at first dismissive, was now fully engaged, drawn into the story she wove with her music. Some faces reflected surprise, others recognition, and a few betrayed the beginnings of tears. She noticed the subtle reactions, though she did not allow herself to be distracted by them. The changing expressions were a confirmation, not the goal. Her focus remained on the connection she was creating, the invisible bridge forming between her and every listener. The power of music, she realized, was not in the notes alone but in the honesty and emotion behind them. She felt herself lifted by the energy in the hall, a shared experience that was both personal and collective. Midway through the performance, a powerful section of music emerged, full of emotion and intensity. She felt every heartbeat, every tremor of the strings, resonating through the hall. Some audience members closed their eyes, allowing the sound to envelop them, to carry them into the world she had built through countless hours of practice. A few hands reached instinctively to their chests, feeling the music's depth. The young woman allowed herself a brief moment to sense the impact she was having, but she quickly returned to the flow of the performance, understanding that it was never about recognition but about truth. The hall grew quieter, each person caught in the spell of the music. Even those who had been laughing at the start were now captivated, their skepticism replaced by a deep emotional response. Tears formed in the eyes of some, while others held back sobs, touched in ways they could not immediately explain. The transformation was complete. The initial judgment had given way to a profound appreciation, a recognition of the courage, dedication, and authenticity behind the performance. She allowed the melody to linger, stretching the notes, emphasizing emotion over speed, letting each phrase breathe. She could sense the collective silence, the way the audience was hanging on to every sound, every nuance. It was a moment of complete connection, one that transcended language, background, and expectation. She had created something rare and beautiful, a shared emotional experience that could not be replicated by mere applause or superficial praise. The final section approached, and she played with a quiet intensity, bringing the performance to its emotional peak. The music swelled, then softened, a gentle ebb and flow that mirrored the journey she had undertaken. Her fingers moved with confidence, each note resonating with purpose, carrying the story to its conclusion. The hall seemed to exhale collectively, caught in the resolution of the emotional journey she had led them on. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had given everything she had and that the audience had received it fully. When the last note faded, a profound silence lingered for a moment, as if the hall itself were reflecting on what had just occurred. Then, slowly, the first sounds of applause began. It started quietly, a few claps, hesitant but sincere, then grew louder as the audience processed the experience. People rose to their feet, some moved to tears, others with expressions of quiet admiration. The laughter that had greeted her entrance was completely gone, replaced by awe, respect, and genuine appreciation. The young woman allowed herself a small smile, feeling the warmth of the connection she had created. She bowed deeply, acknowledging the audience's response, but her thoughts were already elsewhere. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, of the countless hours of practice, the moments of self-doubt, and the courage it had taken to step onto the stage. This performance was more than a demonstration of skill. It was a revelation, a statement of resilience, and a moment of shared humanity. Backstage, she allowed herself to breathe fully, the tension of performance slowly leaving her body. She knew that this experience would stay with her, a reminder of what could be achieved through honesty, courage, and dedication. She thought about the audience, about the individuals whose hearts she had touched, and she felt a sense of purpose that went beyond personal success. Music had allowed her to communicate in ways words never could, to reach people on a level that was intimate, profound, and unforgettable. The applause and reactions echoed in her mind long after she had left the stage. She replayed the expressions she had seen, the subtle signs of emotion, and the way the hall had shifted from laughter to deep engagement. It was a powerful lesson in the unpredictability of human perception and the strength of authenticity. She realized that true impact was not immediate or guaranteed, but that perseverance, honesty, and courage could transform initial judgment into understanding and admiration. That night, alone in her room, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The struggles, the private moments of doubt and practice, the small victories and setbacks, all had contributed to the performance she had just delivered. She understood that the most meaningful achievements were often invisible to others, that the inner work, the dedication to truth and passion, created the foundation for moments that could touch the world. She felt a quiet pride, not of ego, but of acknowledgement for the path she had traveled and the strength she had discovered within herself. She thought about the audience once more, imagining their conversations after the performance, the whispers of surprise, the emotions they carried home with them. She realized that her music had given them more than entertainment. It had offered connection, reflection, and a glimpse into another human experience. That realization filled her with humility and gratitude, reinforcing the belief that art, when approached with honesty and heart, could transcend barriers and leave a lasting impact. The young woman understood that her journey was far from over. There would be more stages, more audiences, more challenges and opportunities to grow. But she now carried the knowledge that courage, authenticity, and dedication could transform fear into connection, doubt into admiration, and laughter into tears of understanding. The lesson of this night, she knew, would guide her in every future endeavor, shaping the way she approached her art, her audience, and her own potential. She allowed herself to rest, her mind replaying the melodies, the emotions, and the faces of those she had touched. The performance had been a culmination of years of effort, resilience, and quiet determination, but it was also a beginning. She felt ready to continue, to explore new depths in her music, and to share her gift with the world in ways she had only begun to imagine. The memory of this night, when the audience had laughed and then cried, would remain a touchstone for everything she would do in the future, a reminder of the power of honesty, courage, and the human connection that art could create. After the performance, the young woman stepped off the stage, her body tired but her spirit lifted. The applause still echoed in the hall behind her, and she could hear people speaking quietly about what they had just witnessed. Some were sharing their surprise at how someone they had laughed at could move them so deeply. She paused for a moment in the wings, taking in the sounds, letting the magnitude of the moment settle into her mind and heart. Backstage, the crew and organizers approached her, offering congratulations. Their smiles were genuine, and she realized that even they had been affected by the performance. The music had not only reached the audience, but it had also touched those who helped make the event possible. She felt a wave of gratitude and relief. All the preparation, the nerves, the fear of failure, it had led to this. She had faced doubt and ridicule and transformed it into something powerful and meaningful. As she walked to her dressing room, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the countless hours of practice alone in her room, the nights spent perfecting each note, the sacrifices she had made to follow her passion. She thought about the doubts she had carried, the moments she had wondered if it was worth continuing, and the courage it had taken to step onto the stage in the first place. Each memory reminded her that every challenge had shaped her into the performer she had become. She sat quietly for a moment, her instrument resting beside her. The room was silent, except for the distant sounds of people leaving the hall, still discussing the performance. She closed her eyes and let herself replay the event in her mind. The laughter at the beginning, the gradual attention of the audience, the way they leaned in, listened, and finally were moved to tears. It was more than she had ever imagined. It was proof that authenticity and dedication could break through preconceived notions and touch hearts. The young woman thought about the individuals in the audience. She imagined the emotions they carried home with them, the stories they would tell, the inspiration they might find in what they had experienced. She realized that her music had given them more than entertainment. It had offered a connection, a reminder of human emotion and resilience. The power of music, she understood, was not just in the notes, but in the honesty and feeling behind them, in the way it could reach people who had not expected to be reached. She remembered the laughter at the beginning of her performance, and instead of feeling resentment or embarrassment, she felt a sense of triumph. That laughter had been the backdrop against which she had shown her strength. It had made the transformation of the audience more profound, their emotional engagement more meaningful. She realized that judgment often came quickly and without understanding, but that courage and authenticity could change perceptions in a powerful way. The evening continued, and as the hall emptied, she stayed a little longer, letting herself savor the moment. She had always believed that her music could speak for her when words failed, but tonight had proven it. The quiet confidence she had built through years of practice, self-reflection, and courage had carried her through a moment that could have been overwhelming. She understood now that her journey was about more than performance. It was about the ability to connect, to communicate, and to inspire through the language she knew best. As she walked home later that night, the streets were calm and quiet. She felt the cool air on her face and thought about the journey ahead. There would be more stages, more audiences, and more challenges, but she felt ready. The experience had given her insight into the power of perseverance, the importance of authenticity, and the impact of courage. She knew that each performance would be an opportunity to grow, to connect, and to continue sharing her story through music. She reflected on the growth she had experienced over the past weeks and months. The shy, quiet girl who had once doubted her own abilities had become a performer who could touch the hearts of hundreds. But she remained humble, understanding that true achievement was not about applause or recognition, but about the connection created and the emotions shared. That understanding became a guiding principle, shaping her approach to every practice session, every performance, and every interaction with her audience. In the days following the performance, messages of appreciation began to reach her. People spoke of how her music had moved them, how it had reminded them of personal experiences, and how it had given them hope or comfort. She read each message carefully, feeling gratitude and humility. The recognition was meaningful, not for her ego, but because it confirmed that the authenticity and courage she brought to her art could resonate deeply with others. She continued to practice daily, refining her skills and exploring new ways to express her emotions through music. Each session was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to prepare for future performances. She experimented with melodies, explored new techniques, and delved into the emotions behind every note. The process was never easy, but she found joy and fulfillment in the dedication itself, knowing that the work she put in would allow her to touch lives more deeply in the future. The young woman also reflected on the lessons she had learned about fear and courage. She realized that fear was natural, a sign that something important was at stake. But courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to move forward despite it. Her experience on stage had shown her that the most profound moments often came when she faced fear and embraced it, allowing her authenticity to shine through. She carried this understanding into every aspect of her life, beyond music, knowing that it would guide her through challenges and opportunities alike. She began to imagine future performances, thinking about how she could continue to connect with audiences and share her story. She dreamed of new venues, different types of music, and collaborations with others who shared her passion. The possibilities seemed endless, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each performance, she knew, would be an opportunity to create moments of connection, to inspire, and to share the emotions that had been her companions for so long. In quiet moments, she thought about the people who had doubted her, who had laughed when she walked onto the stage. She did not harbor resentment. Instead, she felt gratitude for the challenge they had presented. Their skepticism had allowed her to demonstrate strength, courage, and authenticity, and their transformation had reinforced the power of perseverance and dedication. She understood that judgment and doubt were part of life, but that integrity and honesty could overcome them in ways that left a lasting impact. She also reflected on the support she had received from mentors and friends. Their encouragement had been crucial, reminding her that belief in oneself could be nurtured by the belief of others. She understood now that a combination of personal determination and support from those who understood her journey could create the foundation for extraordinary achievements. That awareness deepened her gratitude and reinforced her commitment to her craft. As weeks passed, she continued to perform in different settings, from small gatherings to larger audiences. Each time, she approached the stage with the same combination of nervousness and determination, knowing that every performance was an opportunity to grow and connect. She witnessed the power of music firsthand, the way it could transcend barriers, communicate emotions, and create shared experiences that touched hearts in ways words often could not. Each performance reinforced her understanding of her purpose and the value of authenticity. Her life began to shift subtly, not in grand gestures or immediate fame, but in the quiet recognition of her growth and the impact she had on those around her. She found joy in the connections she created, in the expressions of emotion she could witness, and in the understanding that her dedication had meaning. She realized that true success was measured not by applause alone, but by the depth of the emotional resonance she could create and the courage she displayed in being herself. Years later, she would look back on that first performance, the laughter, the surprise, the tears, and recognize it as a pivotal moment in her life. It had taught her about resilience, the transformative power of authenticity, and the importance of courage in the face of doubt. It had shown her that initial impressions could be misleading and that true connection came from honesty and heart. That night on stage had been more than a performance. It had been a revelation, a moment that shaped the way she approached her art and her life. She understood now that her journey was ongoing. There would always be challenges, skeptics, and moments of fear, but she had discovered the tools to face them. Perseverance, authenticity, courage, and the quiet strength that came from self-belief. She carried these lessons into every performance, every interaction, and every decision, knowing that they would guide her toward continued growth and fulfillment. In the end, she realized that the greatest triumph was not the applause or the recognition, but the ability to stay true to herself and to create moments of connection and emotion for others. That understanding became the cornerstone of her life and her art. She had walked onto a stage that had initially laughed at her, and she had transformed that laughter into tears, understanding, and admiration. The experience had taught her about the power of honesty, the value of perseverance, and the enduring impact of courage. And with that knowledge, she felt ready to continue, to explore, and to share her music with the world, leaving an indelible mark on every heart she touched.